Good evening. For the third consecutive year, the government has announced an increase in the minimum wage to foreign domestic helpers. Starting tomorrow, newly signed contracts will stipulate monthly minimum pay of $4,010, that is 2.3% higher than before. Joao de Silva reports.
Currently, there are 30,000 foreign domestic helpers working in Hong Kong. Starting tomorrow, the minimum monthly pay for workers with newly signed contracts will go up to $4,010, a 2.3% increase from the current $3,920. For those whose employers choose to provide them with a meal allowance instead of free meals, they will see their allowance increase to $920. The government says it has taken into consideration the overall employment and economic situation, including changes in prices and wages, before making the decision. Joseph Law, chairman of the Employers of Domestic Helpers Association, says the raise is acceptable because it is not above the inflation rate. With an increase of 4.4% in 2011 and 4.8% last year, it is the third consecutive year that foreign domestic helpers see their minimum pay being raised. João da Silva, TVB News.
There has been an outbreak of drug-resistant bacterial infections at a number of public hospitals. At Queen Elizabeth Hospital, where the spread is worsening, all patients are being checked for the bug. Non-emergency surgical procedures are expected to be delayed as a result. Jenny Lam reports.
Medical staff at Queen Elizabeth Hospital are busy taking stool samples from every patient there to check for vancomycin-resistant enterococci, or VRE, infection. An estimated 10%, or 300 patients there, are believed to have been infected. The head of the Department of Microbiology at the University of Hong Kong, Yuen Kwok Yung, explains why every patient there must be tested.
Still at the early stage of the epidemic. It is a small epidemic happening in Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And at the moment, the rate of bacteremia is still very low. When the rate is so low, it is still possible to control this epidemic by using a pan-screening of all patients so that we can identify all the silent carriers.
VRE commonly lives in the gut, but a mutated form cannot be treated with the normally effective antibiotic vancomycin. For people with a compromised immune system, for example cancer patients, VRE can be fatal because the bacteria may increase to the point that they go into the bloodstream, that is, causing bacteremia. Most of the infected patients at Queen Elizabeth Hospital are elderly people. Some of them might have been recovering from the ailments and conditions for which they were admitted in the first place, but they are having to stay up to 6 days longer because ordinary homes for the elderly cannot provide the care for VRE patients. That in turn means a delay in non-emergency surgical procedures, for example, for hernia, varicose veins and gallstones. The delay may be up to 2 or 3 months, and up to 600 patients may have to wait as a result. But the hospital stressed that emergency procedures such as cancer treatment and cesarean sections will not be affected. Some visitors we talked to at Queen Elizabeth Hospital this afternoon were not too impressed with hygienic conditions there. This person, though, said he has seen it all during the SARS outbreak and he is aware of all the hygiene precautions. Hospital authority figures show that since May 2011, there have been close to 1,000 cases of VRE in Hong Kong, of which more than 400 were at Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Jenny Lam, TVB News.
Typhoon Wu-Tip is sweeping past the South China Sea and is expected to make landfall tomorrow in Vietnam. 5 fishing boats, including one from Hong Kong, sank in waters off San Cha in Hainan province as Wu-Tip struck the area. 74 people were reported missing, and rescuers managed to find 14 of them. The other 4 boats were from Tai San. All 5 vessels sought shelter in the west of San Cha last night, but the typhoon picked up a lot of energy within a short time, and fishermen say they underestimated its strength.
The United States government is facing a partial shutdown if the Republicans and Democrats can't agree on a funding bill by midnight Monday, U.S. time. Now, the two parties are blaming each other for the failure to reach agreement on temporary funding that would keep federal agencies open. Alan Booknia reports.
In the early hours of Sunday morning, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives passed a measure that would put a one-year delay on President Barack Obama's landmark health care law. Republicans had initially wanted to defund the law altogether. Democrats, who control the Senate, have vowed to block the amendment when they meet later today. That would mean a bill with a simple extension would be sent back to the House, leaving the political hot potato back on the lap of Republican House Speaker John Boehner. On Sunday, Republican members of the House of Representatives staged a protest outside Congress, wondering why the Senate couldn't meet early to give the issue more time.
The Senate needs to act. Why are they waiting? Why aren't those doors open?
If this government shuts down, it is because the Senate, the Democrats who control the Senate, playing politics, want to shut down the government because they have refused to even consider the compromise that we have offered. This president negotiates with all kinds of despots and terrorist leaders. He won't even negotiate with us.
If a stopgap spending bill isn't passed before midnight Monday, government agencies and programs deemed non-essential will begin closing their doors for the first time in 17 years. The funding standoff could be a harbinger for a much more consequential bill on the government's borrowing authority. If its $16.7 trillion US debt ceiling isn't raised by mid-October, the United States could default on some payment obligations. That could cripple its economy and send shockwaves around the globe. Alan Booknia, TVB News.
Kenyan MPs have opened an investigation into alleged intelligence failures prior to the attack on the Nairobi shopping mall this month. Meanwhile, Kenyan authorities arrested another suspect in connection with the attack, which left at least 72 people dead and more than 50 others are still missing. Tony Sabine reports.
Less than 2 weeks since the attack on the Westgate shopping mall, and already questions are being asked about whether the Kenyan government knew a strike was imminent. Members of Kenya's parliament have opened an investigation into alleged intelligence failings prior to the attack, which left scores dead, dozens missing, and more than 100 wounded. There are reports Kenyan authorities received warnings a year ago that the Al-Shabaab terror group could strike in retaliation for Kenya's involvement in Somalia's civil war. Kenyans have become increasingly frustrated over the government's unwillingness to share information. Almost no details have been released about what happened after the first hours of the siege. The Kenyan government merely says investigations are still ongoing, with forensic teams combing the mall for evidence, while police question the suspects.
There are 9 suspects in custody who are held under the counter-terrorism laws. Forensic investigators have identified one of the vehicles used by the terrorists. Investigators have recovered crucial items in the vehicles, and these are providing good and credible leads. Some of the items found in the vehicle include an assortment of illegal weapons.
While Kenya has welcomed outside assistance, it also expressed its unhappiness with the United States warning its citizens to stay away from the country for the time being. Nairobi called the alert unfriendly and asked Washington to lift it. As the investigations continue, people have visited the mall to pay their respects to the victims.
And I've come to light a candle for the departed souls which were departed in this tragedy of Westgate Mall.
Others formed a human chain near the mall in protest against religious extremism, which some believe inspired the attack. Tony Sabine, TVB News.
Former Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi appeared to backpedal on his decision to pull 5 members of his party out of Italy's cabinet. Crisis talks were held last night between Prime Minister Enrico Letta and Italy's president on maintaining the coalition. Berlusconi had demanded those resignations in a show of solidarity ahead of a Senate vote to strip the billionaire of his seat because of a tax fraud conviction and prison sentence. But at least 3 of those 5 have expressed reluctance and indicated they might remain in their posts. Analysts have warned that further political instability would only harm Italy's ability to enact economic reforms.
Greece's government is submitting legislation to Parliament aimed at cutting state funding to the extreme right-wing Golden Dawn Party. Its leadership was arrested over the weekend on charges of acting as a criminal organization. Under the legislation being submitted today, state funding will be suspended for the party if members of its leadership or its lawmakers are being prosecuted for felonies. 6 Golden Dawn lawmakers, 14 members, and 2 police officers have been detained, while arrest warrants have been issued for another 10. The crackdown was sparked by a fatal stabbing this month, which was blamed on a Golden Dawn supporter. Welcome back. Authorities want to shut down Hong Kong's last racing pigeon shop in Kwun Tong as the Urban Renewal Authority redevelops the area. Protesters demonstrated against the move and called on the government to do more to protect traditional businesses. Joel De Silva reports.
It requires a special breed of pigeons, and it's been practiced for thousands of years. Pigeon racing is the sport of releasing these specially trained birds, which then return to their homes over a carefully measured distance. But this tradition may be about to disappear in Hong Kong as the Urban Renewal Authority plans to shut down this city's last pigeon racing shop in Kwun Tong. It's a decision motivated by hygiene concerns and plans to redevelop this old neighborhood. But some aren't happy with this. Protesters awaiting the arrival of URA officers this afternoon say the government isn't doing enough to protect small traditional businesses.
I think this is a very, very treacherous local business. Yeah, I think if the government always say that the development and the preservation can make a balance, but in this case, I don't think so. Yeah, so I think this time for us to not only the pigeon shop but other small shops, small business.
The shop owner Leo Kam Hung says he's been authorized to move the business to Bird Street in Mongkok, but he won't be allowed to have his pigeons on show there. That's despite Mr. Leung claiming to have provided authorities with evidence showing that the animals are in good health. After another racing pigeon shop was shut down in Sai Kung during a bird flu scare 4 years ago, this became Hong Kong's last surviving such business. Mr. Leung claims that last year alone they've won dozens of races and the birds have been repeatedly used in official National Day celebrations. But it seems these birds will not be seen again anytime soon, at least in the sky above Hong Kong. Joel De Silva, TVB News.
Chief Secretary for Administration Carrie Lam has promised poverty alleviation measures in the Chief Executive's policy address in January, now that the poverty line has been defined. Secretary for Labor and Welfare Matthew Cheung, meanwhile, says authorities are conducting an in-depth study on ways to help poverty-stricken working families with children. The goal is to prevent intergenerational poverty. Jenny Lam reports.
The government may have defined what is poor in Hong Kong by drawing up a poverty line, but the less well-off will have to wait until January before the government decides how to help them. Chief Secretary for Administration Carrie Lam, who chairs the Commission on Poverty, promised today that something will be done. Otherwise, she added, the government would only be asking for trouble. She acknowledged that even with the statutory minimum wage, many people who work long hours are still unable to make ends meet. That, in turn, she warned, will result in poverty being passed from one generation to the next if nothing is done. The poverty line is such that a single person making less than $3,600 a month will be considered poor. And according to government data, 1 in 3 elderly people in Hong Kong lives below the poverty line. Lam, though, says the number may be an exaggeration because many older folks who do not have an income may have personal assets and are therefore not really poor. So, in coming up with poverty relief measures, there will be assets evaluation procedures to prevent abuse. Secretary for Labour and Welfare Matthew Cheung says his bureau is looking into ways to provide help for poverty-stricken working families with children.
The idea is basically to promote employment, promote self-reliance, but at the same time to help children, particularly children at school, in order to also tackle the problem of intergenerational poverty.
The goal, he added, is to turn Hong Kong into a more caring and compassionate community. Jenny Lam, TVB News.
Hong Kong commuters can hop on electric minibuses starting next month. They're designed to suit the busy streets of Hong Kong. Our Kirti Nandwani gives us a sneak peek.
This looks like a traditional minibus, so what's special? It's the city's first battery-powered minibus. The bus is 7 meters long, seats 16, and has a unique onboard generator that charges en route or when the vehicle's idling or parked.
Well, in the urban area, mostly, in particular for public light bus operations, it's always start and stop. So we're able to recover the maximum amount of regenerative power so that the energy efficiency, we can increase it by 100% compared with the conventional diesel vehicle.
When fully fueled up, it can run for 450 kilometers compared to diesel minibuses, which can run for only 300 kilometers. The e-minibus is 50% more fuel efficient and can reduce up to 70% of greenhouse gas emissions. The lifespan of these green minibuses can be as long as 15 years. The first 12 electric minibuses will join the fleets of the 3 major light bus operators in mid-October. Manufacturers say the buses are perfect for Hong Kong roads.
Even a short street, we take up a set down more than 10 times. That's why the technology of the Euro 4 and Euro 5 is not suitable in Hong Kong operation. This kind of what we call is a hybrid electric bus. We can operating 24 hours.
The new minibuses will be deployed to routes covering Tsim Sha Tsui, Tuen Mun, and Southern District.
This electric minibus comes at a hefty price tag of over $1 million, twice as much as a traditional one. Kirti Nandwani, TVB News.
From all of us, enjoy your National Day holiday tomorrow.
Good night.